budget officer.
Neville, too.
Okay,
Almost 1,000 people vote.
good morning. I'd like to call the budget meeting to order. In approval of the minutes from, I believe it was October 28th, 27th. Moved by Supervisor Conover, seconded by Supervisor Strau. Any additions, corrections? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Alrighty, as you know, tomorrow is the presentation of the tentative budget. The purpose of this meeting is, one, to review an updated multi-year plan, and also to give the committee an opportunity to react to what I've, the changes that I made since the last budget meeting. Anyway, since the last budget meeting, I did alter the budget for the SPCA and increased that to 80,000. I think you're aware of the sales tax. I did put in 62,000 for the in the buildings for the alarm system to complete that. It's my understanding 40,000 has been expended to date, and 62 will finish it. The boiler system, I budgeted 70,000 from the taxes, picked up another 30,000 from transfers from the airport capital projects to cover the replacement of the boiler in the municipal center. I felt that that was something that needed to be done, and you know, hopefully we'll get through the winter without a problem, but the money needs to be there to change it. I added $10,000 to the Southern Adirondack Library System, increasing that from 35,000 to 45,000. Also transferred, as I said at the last meeting, 250,000 out of the machinery budget, and added another approximately 50,000. You might as well say 50,000 to that to increase the road paving to from 2 million to 2.3 million. I also, as Mr. Conover mentioned at the last meeting, Dave Wick indicated that the invasive species program for Lake George could do with $50,000 less. That was confirmed with Mr. Wick, and I put that 50,000 along with another 44,000 into a contingent fund to take care of the debt payment for the NSTEM building if the board so desires. So I guess that gives the board until the end of the year to make a decision or not. If not, the money's in a contingent fund, and you know, it's not going anywhere. I think that was the last large thing that I did.
Just what's did your use of fund balance, did that number change at all?
Yes, it dropped. I think it dropped about $30,000.
30.
Yeah, from it was just over 500,000 down to 4 something.
to me, that's one of the most significant revisions, if you will, in the budget that I think, in my opinion, really needs to take place. The amount of fund balance that we use annually, especially given some of our concerns on some of the revenue projections going forward. I think those things run hand in glove, you know, because if you don't have monies falling to your fund balance, then you're depleting your fund balance.
Right.
And so I think it was a very wise decision, Frank. I just put that on the record.
Yes, go ahead.
Maybe if I could add to that, one of the things with the fund balance, was mentioned by Supervisor Conover, it's moving in the right direction in terms of the usage, but the other thing I want to make sure everybody's aware of is the it's actually $400 and some odd thousand figure, that is artificially lower because we're using the Westmount proceeds. So what's happened is that it's a difference in how you account for that money. When the budget's put together and the tentative budget's laid out, the $1.3 million in Westmount revenues that won't be expended next year because we're selling that, that money actually shows up in the general fund under what they call public home. And so that acts as another source of funds, so you don't have to draw down on your fund balance. The problem is in our multi-year plan, we had accounted for that originally. So in the end, it's almost as if you're using roughly $8 million of fund balance. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that we're not really using 495 or whatever that number is. We're really using, you could argue, you're using 1.8, and that's the way we had projected it in the multi-year plan. But when you look at the budget, it's just by the nature of the counting, because they moved that 1.3 up into the main part of the budget, and we had it down at the bottom. It just makes it look a little different, but it's really the same thing. As Supervisor Conover pointed out, though, the good news is that when the budget officer made some additional changes, he lowered that over $500,000 amount down a little bit more, because we're trying to control that usage of the funds as much as you can. I hope that's helping to explain it. I just didn't want to have that out there because I was afraid people would see those different numbers and wonder why.
Mr. Chairman, just a follow-on question, Paul. What does that mean in terms of 17, a budget for 17, that 1.3, or that those Westmount dollars, they wouldn't be there, of course.
Right. Well, there's still some additional Westmount money in 17.
That's what
But what I'm saying is, does that just fall off, or does that actually create a revenue need?
It really, well, in the end, because we're using that money, it's going to fall off essentially, and that's why we set up the multi-year plan when we sent it back out to you. It's different on our plan than the way you see it in your budget, because I wanted to keep the multi-year plan consistent with what you've seen before. And the bottom line is when you look at the bottom numbers, if you will, on the fund balance, your fund balance is dropping off more than it did before. And the reason for that is because we changed the sales tax projections really in a significant way. If you recall, we took the 2014 figure, added 6.06% to that, and then multiplied it times 1% gain for 16, and then we went back to 1.5. Before, we had assumed that you were going to make your sales tax projection in 2015, and we added a 1.5 for 16. So because you're losing all of that revenue, that's going to make your use of fund balance higher. And then also you added in some additional expenses, such as the SPCA for $80,000 instead of $20,000. And then the boiler and the other things. So when you add all those things in, it does change those end numbers. And it's really not so much the expense side as it is we're just having some bad luck, if you will, with the sales tax. Historically, you could count on sales tax running 2 to 3% gain each year. And it's just not working out that way right now. And as you saw, we're looking at 0.6 this year so far. Hoping it gets a little higher before the end of the year. But if this trend continues with sales tax, that's going to significantly affect Warren County going into the future.
question on the Westmount. See, it looks like we're going to have a surplus next year, 1.36 million, and 2017, 1.1 million. That's just, is that continuing revenue from insurance companies and private pays? But then
IGT funds are in there.
IGT. Then the, so that's like 2.5 million over the next 2 years.
Right, it's
Surplus
significant,
coming
right.
from Westmount.
And that's on top of the sale price.
Right. But then what are these continuing expenses, that like legacy costs for the employees?
Correct. You have retirees that we have to pay health insurance costs for in the first few, and then those costs are actually hidden in your 16 to 17 costs too. You just see a net surplus, but they're in there as well. Continuing health insurance costs. In the beginning, we'll have some unemployment cost. We'll have some, I think there might be some workers' comp in there blended in. So there's, the workers' comp and the unemployment obviously phase out fairly quickly. The health insurance cost, though, is really going to be your significant cost going into the future, because you'll pay these as long as these people are retirees that are obviously still with us. So.
There was one other item also. There was the district attorney requested a stipend for her ADAs or assistants to cover weekends at the courts for arraignments. She requested $39,000, and I put in $29,000. So that was another thing. Yes, Mr. Brock.
I heard, was the sheriff's budget cut by 50,000?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, I'm asking the question.
So, no. We did, during the process, back at the beginning, we did take money out of overtime and put it into part-time to cover the 10 full-time equivalents. We did get an answer to Mr. Gerard's question there also. If I can find it here. Just had it a minute ago. All the correction officers have been hired except for one sergeant. The sergeant, so I've just been told, is not in the budget, the money for the sergeant. So I guess we have the option to whether do that or not do it. I'll leave that up to the committee. I can tell you what I would have done. If I'd have known it wasn't in there, I would have put it in. So, we'll have to wait until the 20th or whatever. Yes.
Maybe, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Maybe to give this some context, do you have a order of magnitude or what you feel the budget right now means relative to the tax rate?
Relative to the tax rate? Just about the same as last year. It's like a 607,000. What is it? 607, 659 increase in the levy for taxes. So 1.51%. Last year it was 1.53. So it's practically the same.
And to give some, I guess, level of magnitude, another way to look at it would be, if you're just looking at the county tax rate, not to equalize
Right.
for the towns, but if you look at just the county tax rate, that translates into about $3 on a $200,000 home. Increase, $3 increase, not just.
I didn't do that good a job.
Yes, Mr. Westcott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What was the final sales tax rate increase that you plugged in again?
1%. We
1%.
yeah, we took the 2014 actual. We multiplied that by 0.6. Got a 2015 projected and multiplied that by 1%. So it's a decrease of 451,000 overall. So it's 226 approximately to the county, and 226 to the towns. But I think, it's realistic, and I think we're back on where we should be. Maybe, a little optimistic, but where we should be, rather than make-believe numbers. So that was the main purpose of the meeting, was just to give the committee an opportunity to, know what I did since we met last. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, one of the things that at Finance was, there was the treasurer had brought up how much fund balance, the bottom on our fund balance is right now $6 million. $6 million. And he brought up his thoughts that it should be raised. Finance tabled it, knowing that waiting on the 5-year projection and wanting to see what happened at budget. And we all see now the projections on the fund balance here, and given the assumptions that on the revenue, and I guess I'd be interested in knowing, your thoughts, Mr. Chairman, and the committee's thoughts relative to raising that. My sense is that all at once, maybe 10 million might be a little bit aggressive, but I think it should be raised. I think the bottom should be raised. I don't know, Mike, maybe Mike wants to wade in here a little bit, but I think something from this committee back to Finance might be a good thing.
Well, the 6 million is way too low. I mean, if we get to 6 million, we're already borrowing to make our monthly payments and payroll and everything else. We looked at what our average costs are per month, and it's about $10 million to keep the county going. It goes up a little bit and down depending on time of the year and so forth, but it roughly works out to about $10 million. That's why I brought that $10 million point forward. If we get much below that, if we get into the $9 million range, there may be some months where I'm gonna have to borrow to make payroll and to make expenses, especially in the first part of the year. December through February that's the real tough 3-month period, because that's when we got practically no revenue and our expenses are at their highest. With, heating costs and payroll, and that's when a lot of contracts get started, so we have to encumber the funds at that point, so that means we don't have them to spend. So that's, I still would like to see the 10 million, but.
Paul, do you have any thoughts?
Well, certainly the 6 million is too low because that was set years ago, and that was at a time when the budget was lower and our costs were lower, so I certainly agree that it needs to be raised. If Mike is saying 10 million is the number that you don't borrow at, I have to defer to him as to that number because he has a better handle on what his borrowing needs are than I do. The one thing I would point out, though, is that if you set it at 10 million, then you're basically going to say that you've got a problem in 2019.
Right.
Because you're going to be at 9 then. So, and we know that that's coming no matter what. I think even if you set it at 10 or you don't set it at 10 or whatever you set it at, we still have this issue of a diminishing fund balance, which needs to be addressed. The good news is that we have time, and when you have time, you can take care of these things. And I think a suggestion that was made at one of the earlier committee meetings was to start budget meetings, in the beginning of the year, to start to try to figure this out in terms of how you're going to handle this in terms of your revenues and expenditures to try to close that gap. The other part of it, though, for a county, the thing that you have that I think is so difficult for you is that these mandated expenses that come down from the state, there's been some talk about potential relief. So if you got some relief, that could very easily cure your problem.
Yeah.
But the trouble is you don't know that. So you're caught like in a catch-22 situation. The other issue is we don't know, as I mentioned earlier, is what's going to happen with sales tax, because I think we're being extremely conservative at this point, but rightfully so. But will that ever change? So we don't know. But the bottom line is that I think that you got to look at that 9 million in 2019 as you consider your 10 million floor.
Yes. Mr. Monroe?
It seems like there's the two main purposes, I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, but in trying to keep the surplus. One is you can use it for a tax stabilization fund like we have, so it's dangerous to get too low because you can no longer do that. The other is for cash flow to avoid borrowing. In my mind, that's not as important as the tax stabilization because it's not the end of the world if you have to borrow short term. You know, you don't want to do it, but it's not as big a problem that you've lost your tax stabilization fund. But I think maybe something like 8 million, 8 or 9 million makes sense in these circumstances.
Yeah. Mr. Stroh?
Well, at the town level, we only have a $30 million budget compared to the counties, and we had an audit, and the audit went very well. And the fund balance came up as a topic, and he said, well, your fund balances are healthy yet conservative, which was good. I said, well, should we have a fund balance policy in general? He says, absolutely. So we're in the process, he gave us a model one. We're in the process of reviewing that, and eventually with the thought that we will, as a town, have a fund balance policy. But I think that's what I'm hearing from Ron, is a concern that by the year 2019, and I'm hearing from Mike, that if it takes, currently, it takes $10 million to keep things running here on a monthly basis, it might be $11 or $12 million by 2019. So it might behoove us to at least look at the idea of having a fund balance policy.
Yeah, I would agree.
We actually have a fund balance policy, but the question is should we change it? Is 6, we have 6 as a low, 12 as a high.
Okay, well, we're behind you. We're catching up.
Because I asked Joanne to give me the overall increase in salaries, you know, for everybody, and so the only way she could do it was to go budget to budget from 2015 to what's going for 2016. So this will include all the reclassifications and all the changes throughout the year, but it also includes all the raises and 14 adjustments. And she came up with a number of $995,919. So that's almost $1 million each year. So, and that number is going to keep going up as people get their 2.5% or 3% raise. So, you know, I'm all for having earlier budget meetings and everything, but I think we need to be a little more careful, including myself, signing the paper as budget officer or whatever, or chairman of a committee to replace somebody or fill a vacant position. I think a little harder look at those positions, I think, would benefit us greatly in the future. Yes, Mr. Westcott.
Agree with you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with John Stroh and what he said about the policy. I do think we need to look at it and come to agreement. We're facing some challenging times. I wanted to ask about the debt service on the court expansion. Mike sent me the 8 million schedule, and 2016's 205, and then it's roughly 530 for the following years. That's in this plan?
Yeah, well, actually, the entire 16 million's in the plan.
Okay, when does it kick into another 8 million?
Well, it actually phases itself off. It starts, as you mentioned, at 200,000, then I think it goes to, is it 5 right away? Do you have that?
I think it does go.
It does escalate up to $1 million eventually.
Goes from
18 and 19.
205,788 in 2016.
There it is.
2017, it goes to 533,513. 2018, it goes to $1,087,750.
That's because at that point in time, that we're assuming, and I hate to assume, but that's when the second 8 million will be kicking in as an 18.
Okay,
Right.
that was my question. All right, thank you.
And that's just a projection.
Right.
Based on, I don't know how much money we're gonna need, but we figured that's roughly what the engineers have been saying, so we kinda just went with that.
I figured it was in there, so you've answered my question. Thank you.
You have anything else for the Multi report or plan? Anything else from the committee?
And turn over any rocks and find millions of dollars.
Right.
Still looking.
Well, actually, can I address that, Mr. Butcher? I think we can turn over some rocks and find some money, and that is through the sale of property. I think that we have two prime pieces of property that really should be looked at. I mean, that won't solve our operational budget needs because those are recurring expenses, and selling properties, you know, would be a one-time. But I do think there's some significant funds there that are available that might be earmarked for other projects that may be of interest or concern to the board. So I think you can look at those. I think both those properties, though, are really tied into what we do with this traffic out here on Route 9. And you know, I'm hoping that we can address that traffic study and get things moving as quickly as we can in that area so that we'll be in a position to do something. The other good thing is as a result of the Westmount sale, if you'll recall, the buyer had agreed to do a market study for us as part of, you know, the deal. So, and you'll have input in that market study. We'll set up a meeting and, you know, certainly have supervisors probably do it in a committee structure or something, but we'll have input when the time comes for that study as well. So between the traffic study, that study, I think we'll be in a good position to start to do something there, and that should help. The other thing is that, and this, I guess, not so much turning over a rock, but the other thing that I've been looking at is our total assessed value. You know, as a result of the recession, our assessed value declined, and it didn't decline immediately, it declined over years. And even now, we're not at the same level that we were at in 2012. Our assessed value has dropped and has not yet recovered. So the more economic activity, the better, the more assessed value that we have in the county, that'll certainly help us as well. Not so much that it brings in revenue in and of itself, but it allows for a dispersal of the cost, the taxes, you know, essentially among more parties and more properties.
And as to mandate relief, when I was at the NISAC meeting, there's I believe an assembly person, Fahey, that's introduced legislation pertaining to indigent legal defense. It goes along with the lawsuit of the five counties where the state has to provide the funding for this and increased presence. Her proposal is over a 4-year period to get the state to pay for all the counties' indigent legal defense, and to us that's $850,000. So hopefully, if the state sees fit, that would definitely bring some relief to the county. I think it's like $320 million to the whole state, because they already do it in New York City. They already provide the funds.
Mr. Chairman, do you need a motion of support for the budget as amended from this committee?
Sure.
I'll make that motion.
Moved by Supervisor Stroh, seconded by Supervisor Monroe. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. If there's nothing else, motion to adjourn. Supervisor Kennedy, seconded by Supervisor Stroh.
Good job, Frank.
All in favor?
It's a tough job.